Imagine standing in the rain for 26 years.
Okay.
You're holding a microphone,
Yeah.
you're in a heavy coat, and you are the person an entire region invites into their living room every single night to tell them the bad news.
You're reporting on the floods, the factory closures?
All of it. The crime, the slow decline of the towns you love. And then one day, you decide you're done reporting on the decisions other people make.
And you want to be the one making them.
Exactly.
I mean, that's the classic poacher turned gamekeeper story, isn't it? But in this case, the gamekeeper has moved from, like, a muddy field in the Irish Midlands all the way to the glass towers of Brussels.
And that transition is, well, it's anything but smooth.
Right.
Today we're doing a deep dive into Ciarán Mullooly. If you follow Irish media at all, you know the face.
Oh, for sure. RTA Midlands correspondent for over 2 decades.
But in a move that, honestly, surprised a lot of people, he traded that microphone for a seat in the European Parliament, an MEP for Midlands Northwest.
And what makes this deep dive so interesting isn't just the career change, it's the tension in his profile.
What do you mean?
Well, you have a man who built his entire brand on being the boots-on-the-ground rural journalist, you know, the guy who gets the price of beef and the local bus schedule.
And suddenly he's a legislative power player in the EU.
Arguably one of the most complex bureaucratic environments on the planet.
It's a massive culture shock. So to really understand how this is playing out, we've pulled together a pretty serious stack of sources.
We've got profiles from his 2024 election campaign.
Yep, records of his new committee roles housing, the just transition, and we'll get into what that means in a minute.
And we've even dug into his published books to sort of get the philosophy.
So our mission here is to figure out one thing.
Is his newsroom approach to politics actually working? Or is it just good marketing?
Let's start with the campaign itself. Because when you look at how Mullooly ran for election in 2024, it did not look like a standard political operation.
No, not at all. Usually when someone runs for Europe, it's a machine. You've got consultants, data analysts, you know, layers of management.
Very corporate.
Right. Mullooly didn't do that. And the sources suggest that was very much by design. He explicitly structured his campaign like a newsroom.
A newsroom. Okay, let's unpack that. What does that actually mean in practice for a political campaign?
It means lean. It means fast, reactive. He had a tiny staff, about 20 people total.
20 people for a constituency that covers 15 counties? That's fast.
It's huge. Running a ground game there usually requires an army, but he ran it like a broadcast unit. The goal wasn't to knock on every single door. It was efficiency and direct communication.
There's one detail in the files that I just love, and I think it highlights this newsroom mentality perfectly.
Let me guess. The phone calls.
The phone calls. He apparently insisted on answering his own phone calls from constituents.
Which is just, it's practically unheard of at that level.
Right. Usually you've got 3 layers of handlers or press officers before you get anywhere near the candidate.
But he refused. He wouldn't let handlers manage the comms. And that connects directly back to his history.
How so?
Think about it. For 26 years, if you had a story in Longford or Offaly or a grievance, who did you call?
You called Ciarán.
He was accessible.
Yeah.
If he had suddenly put up a wall of PR people, it would have just shattered the brand.
He knew his biggest asset wasn't a policy paper. It was the fact that people felt they knew him.
And the numbers back that up.
Over 57,000 first preference votes, which for our listeners outside Ireland, that's the gold standard. That's someone going in and saying, this guy is my #1.
And look at where those votes came from. Exceptional performance in County Offaly and Longford.
The favorite son effect.
For sure.
Yeah.
But it's also a validation of that accessibility. It wasn't just, I saw him on TV. It was, I trust him to answer the phone if I have a problem.
But this is where the story gets a bit more complicated. He gets elected. He goes to Brussels. Now, usually we can categorize politicians pretty easily. Left, right, green, whatever. Mullooly is harder to pin down. He ran under the banner of a party called Independent Ireland.
Yes, which is generally seen as a populist, rural-focused party.
When you hear Independent Ireland, you think of a very specific type of maybe right-leaning, anti-establishment politics.
Skeptical of the EU, skeptical of green policies, that kind of thing.
Exactly. That's the domestic brand. But then you look at where he actually sits in the European Parliament.
Yes, the European groups.
He didn't join the hard-right groupings. He joined Renew Europe.
The centrist liberal coalition.
It feels like a plot twist. That's the group of Emmanuel Macron. It's pro-EU, pro-business, socially liberal.
So how does a rural Irish populist fit in there?
That's the question. It's a significant pivot. Or maybe it reveals his true political colors.
It suggests that while he ran on a populist ticket at home, tapping into that rural anger, his operating mode in Europe is far more centrist and pragmatic.
Okay, let's dig into the specific issues, because that's where we see if this centrist populist thing actually works. Immigration was the hot-button issue in 2024.
It was the defining issue for many candidates, and you had some colleagues in his own party taking a very strict, sometimes harsh, anti-immigration stance.
But Mullooly didn't go there.
No. The sources quote him explicitly. He said, "I don't think Ireland is full."
That is a bold statement when you're courting a conservative rural vote that's feeling pressure on local services.
It's risky, but watch how he pivots. He immediately moves the conversation to logistics, to planning.
Okay.
His argument isn't about ideology or culture wars. He advocates for better services and infrastructure to support communities that are taking in new people.
So he frames it as a management failure by the government, not an issue with the migrants themselves.
Exactly. It allows him to acknowledge the frustration of his voters without demonizing the newcomers. It's a very delicate balance.
And he also broke ranks on social policy. I saw a note about him disagreeing with Michael Collins, another high-profile member of his party.
Yes, this made headlines. His party colleague, Michael Collins, suggested chemical castration for sex offenders.
Wow.
And Mullooly openly stated he does not agree with that approach. It shows he isn't just a rubber stamp for the party line. He's carving out a distinct Mullooly identity.
Socially, more moderate, but fiercely protective of rural interests.
And speaking of rural interests, we have to talk about the farmers. You can't be an MEP for the Midlands without talking about beef.
Absolutely not. And this is where he aligns perfectly with that common sense platform he ran on. He has been a very vocal opponent of the Mercosur trade deal.
Right.
For those who don't follow international trade that closely, can you give us the quick version of Mercosur? Why is an Irish MEP so worried about it?
Sure. So Mercosur is a massive trade agreement between the EU and South American countries like Brazil and Argentina.
And the big fear for Irish farmers is that this deal opens the floodgates for South American beef to enter Europe.
It's cheaper, yes. But the real sticking point for Mullooly is the playing field.
What do you mean?
Well, Irish farmers are subject to incredibly strict environmental regulations to lower carbon emissions. Mullooly's argument is, how is it fair to make us jump through these hoops and then import beef from countries that are cutting down the Amazon rainforest to graze cattle?
So it's an environmental argument just as much as an economic one.
Precisely. And he didn't just issue a press release on this. He led a campaign, got over 30,000 signatures to protect Irish beef farmers.
This is where he leverages that man-of-the-people energy.
It's a tightrope. On one side, he's sitting with the liberals in Brussels talking pragmatism. On the other, he's collecting signatures in cattle marts and fighting trade deals.
And that seems to be the definition of his common sense politics. It isn't about left or right. It's about what works for the people who elected me.
Exactly. It's transactional, but in the best sense of the word.
Now, usually when a new MEP arrives in Brussels, they spend the first year just finding the bathroom.
And figuring out the coffee machine, it's a labyrinth.
But Mullooly seems to have landed some serious roles, like immediately.
He has. And this is where we see the reporter becoming the legislator. In early 2025, he was appointed vice chair of the European Parliament's Special Committee on the Housing Crisis.
That sounds huge. Housing is arguably the issue of our time, not just in Ireland, but across Europe.
It's a massive portfolio for a newcomer. And true to form, he's coming at it with very specific, tangible ideas. He uses this phrase I find very telling. He says the EU is choking housing supply.
Choking. That's such a journalist's word. It's visceral.
It implies there's plenty of supply, but someone has their hands around the neck of the system.
So what's the Mullooly plan to unblock it?
Two main things stand out. First, he's advocating for the removal of VAT on building materials for first-time buyers.
VAT being the sales tax, so make the bricks and mortar cheaper.
Theoretically, yes. Lower the input costs, lower the house price. But his second point is even more interesting because it gets into how money moves inside the EU.
Okay.
He's pushing for a radical change in how charities access EU funding for housing.
How does it work now?
Right now, the system is reimbursement-based. That means you, as a housing charity, have to go out, raise the money, build the project, spend all the cash.
And then you submit the receipts to the EU and ask for the money back.
Exactly, which is fine if you're a giant corporation with millions in the bank.
But if you're a local housing charity in Longford,
you simply can't do it. You don't have the cash flow to float A multi-million-euro project for 2 years while you wait for a check from Brussels.
It creates a barrier that stops the small, local players from building anything.
It really does. So Mullooly wants to flip this. He wants to allow charities to access 80% of the funding before they break ground.
That sounds like common sense to me.
But I imagine in the EU audit department that sounds like a revolution. It's a complete inversion of their risk model. The EU hates risk.
They want to see the finished building before they pay.
But Mullooly's argument is basically, do you want houses built or not? He's trying to cut through the red tape that he probably spent years reporting on.
He's saying the process has become more important to the bureaucrats than the outcome.
And that has to change.
This theme of cutting red tape comes up again in his other big role, the just transition.
Right.
We should probably pause here and define what just transition actually means in this specific context. It sounds like a buzzword.
It is a buzzword, but in the Irish Midlands, it is incredibly real and incredibly painful. It refers to the move away from fossil fuels, specifically the closure of the Bordnamona peat bogs and the ESB power stations.
And we need to stress, these weren't just businesses. These were the economic engines of the entire region for decades.
Entire towns were built around the bogs. You had generations of families working there.
So when they shut down for climate reasons, the promise was a just transition.
And the EU set up a specific fund, the Just Transition Fund, or JTF, to help these regions create new industries, retrain workers, and basically keep the towns alive.
Money to stop them from becoming rust-belt wastelands.
That's the idea, and Mullooly has been appointed as rapporteur for this fund.
Rapporteur. Very fancy EU term. What does that actually mean?
It's essentially the person appointed by the parliament to investigate an issue, draft reports, and check on how the funding is working. It's a powerful oversight role.
So he's the eyes and ears of the parliament on this. What has he found?
He is not happy.
Yeah.
He's been extremely vocal that Ireland's allocation, 84.5 million, is just far too small compared to other EU regions facing similar shutdowns.
So we're getting shortchanged.
That's his argument. But it isn't just the amount of money, it's the access. It's the same story as the housing charities.
The application process is a nightmare.
Exactly. The quote I saw was that you need a law degree to fill out the form.
Which completely defeats the purpose.
If you're a local community hall in County Longford or a group of former peat workers trying to start a tour guide business, you do not have an in-house legal team in Brussels.
So he's fighting for radical simplification. He wants the money to actually reach the ground.
Instead of getting stuck in administrative purgatory. It's interesting, isn't it? He's basically approaching the European Commission like an investigative reporter.
Looking at the system and saying, this doesn't work for the user.
And that's the unique value of his background. He isn't a career politician who just accepts bureaucracy as a law of nature. He looks at it and asks, why is this so hard?
Which brings us to the final piece of the puzzle. We've talked about the politician, the campaigner. We should talk about the author.
The chronicler. Before any of this, he was writing down the history of rural Ireland. He has 3 major books that really serve as the intellectual foundation for what he's doing now.
If you want to know why he cares about the peat bogs or the housing lists, read the books.
Exactly. First, you have Death on Holy Thursday from 2006.
Which covered the Abbey Lara shooting, a tragic event where a local man was shot by police.
It really shook the Midlands, and it showed Mullooly's ability to handle deep, sensitive community trauma and that breakdown of trust between the state and the rural citizen.
Then Back to the Future in 2015.
A reflection on the recession. He was reporting from the front lines of the economic crash in rural Ireland. While Dublin was recovering, he was seeing the ghost estates, the shops closing.
The hollowing out of rural Ireland.
And his most recent one, The Future, is now from 2023. This one is key.
Aye.
Because it focuses on renewal. It's not just lamenting the decline, it's looking at how the Irish heartland can revive itself. He's been documenting the decline and the resilience of these areas for 30 years.
So when he stands up in Brussels and talks about a town dying because of red tape, he isn't speaking in the abstract. He's thinking of specific towns he's written books about.
He has the receipts, and that gives him a distinct kind of authority. He isn't speculating, he is witnessing.